Hi there, thanks for watching. Okay, in this video, I want to talk about something that's very important to me at this stage. Okay, and I can always change my mind. This is just for now, how I feel about it, and everything I say here is just opinion, but I really am starting to believe. I mean, really believe, and I say this as my opinion after decades of dealing with this condition. Okay, that I really think I really question whether it's even healthy to know to even get on the road of knowing why we have this condition. Okay. Um, I think it might even be actually counterproductive. Okay, to actually either get too much into inquiry or even start to believe that we know, or even to know, even if we knew. No, um, I believe that knowing why we have NPD, or even getting in that ballpark, is actually could even be anti-therapeutic. Could even hold us up. Okay. Now, what do I mean by that? Because why there's different whys. The why is the explanation. Like it has to do with the neurology. That's just what we're dealing with. To deal with what we're dealing with. That is not really the deep why that troubles me. Okay, the why as to why do I have this condition? Okay, what happened to make me have this condition? Okay, I think that could be a problem. Okay, because I think unconsciously we're going to latch onto that question as kind of like somehow the answer. Okay, when it's just going to distract us from dealing with what we've got. Okay. Um, Now, is it important to have a good background of your own history just as a contextual framework? Yes, that is important. Contextual framework, where do I come from? Of course, that's important, but not to get hung up in it. Okay, like always hung up in it as somehow, the keys to the kingdom are somewhere lost in that mystery of some lost memory or a lost synthesis of my memories. You know, I think that is where we can actually go against, we can actually work against our recovery. Okay, sorry. So, I'm going to try to explain what I mean by this. Okay. And in order to explain what I mean by this, I'm coming to believe myself. Okay. A couple of things about this disorder that at least for me. Okay. Number one, okay, is the belief that, how would I put this? Okay. It's not an addiction. Okay. So let's not talk about addiction, but sobriety is a big part of this condition. In other words, I believe this condition is a situation where we can be in a pervasive tendency not to have sobriety. Okay, and I'll define that later. But I think sobriety is at stake. Okay, with this condition, I think someone with a real active symptomatic personality disorder is potentially in a state of pervasive lack of sobriety, and that's very dangerous. I mean, it's not exactly the same lack of sobriety that people are like on drugs. It's maybe more insidious. But what's taken away from us, what I would consider to be the dialectical, our dialectical, full dialectical process. Okay, that's taking a lot out of somebody, and there's a lot of not. I wouldn't say. I'm not going to say disabling, but it's sort of like diminished capacity. Okay, it diminishes our capacity to such an extent that we are just categorically in another way of living that is going to be problematic. It's going to cause a lot of problems that we couldn't even anticipate. So I'm going to say that my first belief about NPD is that it is a degraded sobriety. Okay, and it is pervasive. All right, and it is insidious. All right, and the second thing, I guess, is that it's not enough to sort of say, well, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but I'm saying, because I've done this. I experimented with addictions recovery, and I never felt at any point that I was in a lifetime commitment. Okay. Now, what does that mean? Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think there's two issues at stake with NPD. I think one is that this is a condition having to do with our sobriety, and I think the other thing is that until we develop a kind of a lifetime commitment, I think we are kind of falling short of fully accepting what's going on. Okay. Um, Now, how can I say those things and say that I don't want to get too much focused on why we have this condition? Okay, because I'm saying a lot. I'm saying that we have to buy into a lot, or we have to come to a place where we're, we're accepting a lot, but somehow are we not asking why we have this? I mean, it's a very complicated thing, and so I'm not going to say that my point of view is free of contradiction. Okay, I think what I'm saying probably is a little bit incoherent, but I'm just going to try to run with it a bit. And some incoherence is probably actually very healthy, but that's an easy way out. So let me try to explain what I'm saying. Okay, so basically, the two things that I've come to see, and that I think are very clear, at least in my experience, is that my sobriety is at stake. Okay, and I don't think it takes much to see that if your sobriety is at stake, I think the quality of your life and the life of people around you is at stake. Okay, so there's a lot at stake, and it has to do with sobriety. Okay, so that's the first thing. Without getting into the details, just sobriety. Okay. The second thing is that I have come to believe that anything short of a life commitment is really just kind of not fully invested. Okay, and how serious the condition really is. All right. So, in other words, I think to approach our recovery with anything short of an investment that matches the seriousness of the condition, I think is a problem. All right. Now, granted, everybody's on a path, and there is going to be some level of insight that's going to have to take place where a person is going to have to see that, yeah, you know what, this is a checkmate situation. Okay. And some people are just not quite there. I've taken a long time. Okay, and God, I probably could relapse. I hate to say that. I probably could relapse, but there is a point. Like, I think when I was in my addictions recovery programs, I think I was in check. I admitted that I was in check. I don't think I ever admitted I was in checkmate. I don't think I ever admitted that. I don't think I knew how to. I don't think I was ready to. Okay, and I wish there was a way. If I had a magic way of helping people get to checkmate, man, I don't yet know how to do that. So I'm just going to talk about my experience, and this comes short. Maybe somebody later, somebody else can help people understand to see they're in checkmate. But at least in my experience, I'm starting to get closer, I think, or maybe I'm starting to get to the point where I can see the checkmate. It's not just check. I'm in checkmate. Okay, because once you get to checkmate, now you're not just experimenting with recovery. You're Once you realize you're in checkmate, you are have to be committed to recovery. You have to be committed. It's for the rest of your life. Okay. And I just think I just haven't gotten there. I don't know what's my defect. I've had so much stubborn trouble to get there. But I think at some point, you realize that it's checkmate and it's for life. And I'm not saying, I mean, there's so many improvements we can make. I mean, so I'm not saying I'm just going to be always this way exactly. I mean, there'll be improvements, but I'm just saying, just in general, there are some fundamental things at the deepest level of me that I think I will need a lifetime of assistance, and extra logistics, let's say, extra engineering around, my condition. And I think even people who don't have a personality disorder can learn from that. Anybody who has even just a slight anger management issue, or even just a slight tendency to be lazy, we can all develop a little bit of assistance in the logistics of how we deal with our life. Okay, so it's not just for people who are diagnosable. I think all of us can learn from this, to greater or lesser degrees. All of us can have some kind of mild, informal or more formal program in our life. Okay, but in any case, so the two things for me that I think are so important are just like the life commitment. Committed as much as I believe the condition is serious. Okay, this condition is serious to the point of being pervasive, indefinitely pervasive. So that's how serious the commitment is. It's a lifetime commitment. Okay, because once you get to that point, I think the seriousness of a lifetime commitment, I think, is much more important than any pretentious exploration into why I have this condition. Okay, because if you really think about it, when we fuss over trying to figure out how I got here or why I'm here, I almost think that is in the nature of some of our little bit of wiggling around, avoiding that place where you're convicted. You know what I mean? Because you can just imagine if you're in litigation, or if you're, like, say, on trial for a criminal offense, you're just always in the defense mode, always trying to look around, do anything but be convicted. It's really hard to be convicted. um, and I almost suggest to people not to be convicted until they're ready to be convicted, because a fake you fake yourself into thinking you're convicted. That's not real. I mean, you have to really get to where you're convicted. you know so I think anybody who's kind of experienced being convicted, it is a different place from the exploration of why did I get here. Okay, I think we all maybe have experienced that. Maybe some of us that have been in the criminal system who've actually been convicted, we probably know that real well. They probably still have a lot of arguments in their pocket, but when you're convicted. You know what I mean? You can still wonder, like, God, I could be convicted of murder, and I could still wonder, like, if I didn't get up that morning, or if I didn't get in that fight, but I'm convicted. It's like, checkmate. It's like, how am I going to deal with that? You know, so again, I don't have any magic solution. To get to the place of being convicted, that's a special place. You can't just, I can't just chew gum and just tell you, how that's going to be. Each of us personally, to get to the place of being convicted, the only sign that you're convicted is that you take on the stakes of your situation with the right commitment. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think commitment and the level of commitment is so much more important than fussing around the pretentious question of how did I get here. Because I think this is similar to the UFOs. I think there's so much deep in us that wants to know why, that wants to attack the injustice of why I'm here. There has to be something unjust about why I'm in this situation. If I'm in a situation where, let's say, I have something that's maybe just, you know, that not everybody has. Not everybody has a personality disorder. Not everybody has cancer. You want to know why. You know, and maybe on some level, I'm not saying it's totally worthless to look into it. But I guess I'm just saying, I think it's much more important to get to the place of where we are in that commitment, a level of commitment that matches the seriousness. Okay, and I guess, to me, I just think being convicted and having that commitment, really entering into the deepest commitment, I think that is much more profound in the soul. To know that you're in a place of a life commitment, you know, that is so much more profound than knowing why you're there. Okay, I really think so. And I think it's so interesting too, because when you go into therapy, I think almost universally the first thing they ask you is, why are you here? You know, and I think that's just it's almost like a riddle. It's a riddle, and it's almost like teasing you with what's not going to work. Not to say, again, not to say that it doesn't help to have context. I think everything about context helps us open the door to just processing whatever we're dealing with. So, having a context on your life is so important. But I think getting into that fishing expedition, into the cause, into the reason how you got where you are, what are the combinations of terrible things that happened to me that made me, why I'm like this, you know, I think, for whatever reason, I just see that as kind of like, when we get too much into that, I think that is kind of just dancing and dancing and dancing, because I don't want to stand on the edge of the cliff and maybe just jump off the cliff. You know what I mean? And when I say jump off the cliff, I'm not talking about like a suicide. I'm saying, like, how many people have been, like, say, on the edge of a cliff, like to do cliff diving, to test your courage, and all the things we do to avoid just finally just jumping off, you know, and maybe that's not the best analogy, I think, because I think, a life commitment, it is, I guess it is in a way like jumping off, but the problem is that in our case, we can relapse anytime. Even the most heartfelt conviction, we can slip out of it and relapse. There's no question about it. You can lose your sobriety so fast. And it's sobering. It's sobering, but whatever. But so I guess maybe the cliff diving thing, that's just a stupid metaphor. But just really, to get to that place where you're really just taking to heart, that you're never really going to know. I'm sorry. you're going to know exactly why you have this condition about the same as you're going to know whether there really is UFOs or aliens, traveling around, you know, visiting Earth. I mean, you're not going to know. I'm sorry. You may think you know. You're not going to know. You may believe, but you're not going to know. Okay. So I guess, and then the other thing too. Here's the most important thing I think, and this is, I guess maybe this is even like the second part of this whole video. This is like starting chapter 2 of this video, like part 2. Okay. So what do we mean when we talk about sobriety? Okay. Exactly what do we mean when we talk about sobriety? We know when we don't have it. Okay. When you don't have sobriety, your judgment is just out of whack. Okay. Even you're just baffled by life. Things are just happening to you. You know, just repeating patterns, not feeling really like you're settled and adjusted into life, and it's just like a feeling of just like you're not well adapted, you know, to your reality, and I guess it's hard to put your finger on it, but I guess deep in our hearts, I think we kind of know when we're just kind of running on the hamster wheel. We're just kind of flittering around, just reacting to things. You just kind of know when you don't have your full sobriety. Okay, so um, but what is exactly sobriety? Okay, and I think this is leads into the question of why it's important not to know or even get into too much trying to find out why am I here? Okay, exactly why am I here? Okay, because in my opinion, and this is, I invite people to disagree, but I really believe, and I'm starting to believe it more and more. I believe that sobriety, especially for cluster B people, and I think even for regular people, um, I think sobriety is starting to re-plug into the things that we've unplugged from. Okay, so like I've talked about in other videos, I think that there's a lot of environmental taxation. Okay, in just our experience of life. Okay, there's a lot in our environment, just our normal environment. There's all kinds of considerations and issues that sort of they sort of burden us and tax our attention. Okay, so in my life, like right now, am I worrying about my wife? How much am I concerned about what's important to her, what she's going through? Okay, my brothers and sisters, let's say my children, what are they dealing with? Let's say the people I work with. I work with people. What are their interests? What can I, am I really taking on all the considerations that are important to those people? What about just my life itself? What about, am I really paying attention to all the issues when I make a decision? Am I really weighing all the pros and cons, or am I just making really essentially just flash decisions? You know, there are a lot of issues that could weigh on me more, that could tax me more, that could tax my attention more. Okay, that I just kind of unplug from and sort of dissociate from because it's just my habit, I guess my bad habit. I like the easy life. I guess I'm habituated to just kind of an escapist, dissociated life. So I would say that in a way you could propose that sobriety for cluster B people is assuming delivering ourselves to and assuming a certain level of environmental taxation. Okay, so basically we could say that in a shorthand, to make it a shorthand, we could say that sobriety is, let's say, a reasonable level of environmental taxation. Okay, so let's try to play with that idea. Okay, a reasonable level of environmental taxation. Okay, and we understand psychologically that the things that tax us, the things that really burden us, are dissonances. Okay, things that are unresolved and having a lot of issues on the table. Okay, things that compete for our attention, that taxes us. Okay, especially when we don't have answers. Okay, when you get an answer, the burden is lifted. You see what I'm saying? And so I think, I'm sorry, but here's the thing. When we look for reasons, why am I like this? We want to lift the burden of having this condition, of not knowing why we have it, just being burdened with our condition. So when we're seeking, why do I have this condition? We're looking for being relieved of that burden. Okay, and that is exactly the direction opposite of what I think is sobriety. And again, I'm not saying we should just be ignorant. I'm not saying we shouldn't know detailed our context, because context is the map of the world. We got to have context. But I just am sure that if we could live more in not knowing, okay, and just be being burdened a little bit, find the burden that fits us. Everybody has a burden they can handle, so don't overburden yourself, but just sort of like deliver yourself into environmental taxation to the level that you can start to practice with it and start to develop an ability to live with taxation. Because there are some taxes that pay off. They actually produce profit. You see, not all taxation is just a taking. In some countries, you pay your taxes and you get very good health care, you get very good road system, you get a lot of security. Other countries, they do kind of just take your money. So it kind of depends what country. But in this country, in the country of cluster B, by finding the right level of delivering yourself into environmental taxation, you do get more back than what you spent. Okay, so it pays. It pays if you find the right level. If you go too much, cluster B people have to always worry about it exaggerating. Okay, so don't do it too much. Just find the medium level. But paying taxes in terms of just letting yourself be burdened by the taxes of the environment, that does pay off. Okay, it really does pay, and we will grow that way. Okay, and so in a funny way, going around the long way. Okay, if we don't worry so much about that magic lifting of lift my burden. I want to know why I'm here. If we can just kind of let that go, that'll be another thing to add to the environmental taxation, another burden. Another unresolved big question that burdens us. Okay. But if we can just not be so impatient for an answer and just live through the burden itself, metabolize through the burdens of that and other issues that weigh on us that we don't have the answers to. Okay. If we can just let ourselves admit those environmental weights and just have that burden, have that taxation, that environmental taxation, I think over time we will metabolize those sort of mysteries. And I think the metabolization of those mysteries will actually be more meaningful than a cheap answer that we could have gotten early. Okay. Because when you have a lot of mystery, let's say a lot of, sort of dissonant possibilities, dissonant factors that could have different possible answers. Okay. If we just postpone the answer and just let those things metabolize, I think over time there's an organic synthesis that will be more meaningful, put us into a more meaningful place than if we got an early answer. Okay. And I think, even some psychologists agree with me on this. I think, they ask you, why are you here? But, they don't really want you to know. And in fact, I think some psychologists in therapy, they avoid trying to get too much into answering too much, you know, like why exactly, why exactly. But at the same time, kind of almost like, I would say almost like perversely, almost perversely, I think psychiatrists do kind of want to lead you back to asking why, which is kind of funny. It's or psychologists, So, I do personally think that the psychoanalytic school, of therapy, I think they are infected by this almost non-sober, this very non-sober interest in getting a kind of a final answer and sort of getting an unburdening through the catharsis of understanding. I think that's kind of almost like, I would say, the drug they're selling, that once I unlock the understanding, I'm going to lift the weights and I'm just going to go into an escapist possibility, which is really kind of this idealized fantasy of what it would mean to be, better. So I think the cathartic, the cathartic unburdening, I think in some ways, I think is kind of almost like an avoidance of the organic process. Because now I'm not saying you're just going to be burdened and nothing's going to happen. Okay. I'm saying that if you allow the burden and allow the organic metabolization of our burdens, okay, learn to take on more weight, learn to plug in more, not to unplug, and it does take effort because our instinct is not to do that. Okay. But if you allow yourself to do that without trying to get fast answers, let the answers come through the process. Okay. And not trying to pre-guess answers, and let the path be the answer, not like a certain point in the path. The path goes on forever, you know. But if we can get into that place where we're sort of like allowing more dissonances in our life, allowing more issues to weigh on us, not having answers, being more burdened by uncertainty. Okay. I think the metabolization in that path okay, will produce a much more meaningful place of sobriety than if we had a whole list of answers, okay, even if those answers were true. Because just getting true information doesn't make you mature. Okay, we are like oak trees that have to grow like majestic oak trees. Okay, and just having a list of answers is not going to get you to those decades that are going to take you to be that great oak tree that you could be. But you have to, to have those decades mean anything, we have to, I'm sorry, we have to kind of like deliver ourselves into, that place. And I think that comes through a commitment, you know. So in my case, I really think that, in terms of our sobriety, which is really our lives, because what is a human life without sobriety? It's a sad, we don't have to answer that question, but I think we know it would be kind of a sad, it would be sad to even consider what that really means, a person without sobriety. That is almost to say a lost life. You know, we can take on the stakes of that without having a ready answer, a ready theory. Just take the stakes of it, take the weight of it. That leads to commitment. It really does. And I think the commitment is just as deep as the awareness of the stakes. Of what it means to not have a sober life. And what that really means. So, I think coming into that place of sort of, recognizing the magnitude, and the seriousness and the stakes of, potentially living a life without sobriety. Okay. And then sort of, at the same level, sort of taking on or sort of finding the checkmate, you know, and sort of entering into that commitment, delivering yourself into that commitment, and then willingly opening yourself and taking on, delivering yourself into the burdens of, a reasonable level of environmental taxation, and really taking on the taxation as a program, not as a decision. We can't make decisions. We cannot make decisions. Our decisions will be made for us by our more deeper instincts. We are not able to make decisions. We have to make commitments. Okay. And the commitment is a program. Okay. So a person with cluster B can't make a decision. There's no decision. If I make a decision today, I will default on that position, on that decision. I will breach it. Okay, I'll break that decision because I cannot maintain just a decision. I have to deliver myself into a program, a commitment. And even as I say it, am I really making it for life? Is it really a life commitment, like this ring on my finger? Is it really like getting married, like that serious, like for life? And a lot of people get married and they don't mean they deep in their heart they know it's probably not for life. People, marriages are like buying hamburgers. It's like fast food, but like we need to think about these things. What does it mean as a person, not to have anything in your life that is a deep, convicted commitment? What does that mean? What kind of life are we living with no real commitments? It's a question. I'm not trying to answer anything, but at least in the case of cluster B, you know, I think at some point we're already checkmated. If we really are diagnosable as cluster B, we are already checkmated. And if I'm subclinical and I just have, like, say, anger management issues, or I just have some ego issues, I'm still checkmated because that's deep characteristics. Your personality is your personality. So like, um, you know, the checkmate is you're done. So like, ask ourselves, what kind of person am I? What is a person who doesn't have commitments that match their circumstances? You know, and I just think that, when we're fishing for answers, like, why am I here? How did I get here? I think that is, that's just kind of like dancing around, not getting to the place maybe. And it's something other than finally getting to that place where you're willing to make that delivery of yourself into, a level of commitment that is, the beginning of reaching, sort of like the truth of our humanity, sort of like the depth of our actual situation as a human being, you know. So I just encourage people to think about what it would mean to reach a level of commitment, delivery and commitment, that matches the actual seriousness of the circumstances of our lives, you know. And I think that's kind of where we start to approach the beginning of sobriety, you know, which I think is way more important than fishing for, some kind of answer as to why I got here. So I just offer that. Thanks for watching.